Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing something that is a request I have had, believe it or not. That's the first believe it or not. The second believe it or not is I have fan art of little old me by Rain and Anna. I hope I said that right. Rain and Anna. I will put her Instagram on the screen along with the art. It's so very cute and sweet and I like it a lot. Thank you so much, Rain and Anna. What I'm doing today is discussing all of the D&D characters I've ever played. I've only been playing for a few years, so it isn't actually that many in the scheme of things. But yes, I'm going to break them down and talk about who they are, who they were, and why I decided to create a character like that. So, with no further ado, I don't have art for all of these characters, so for some of them I'll describe what they look like, but for some of them I have no art to show. But all of my main campaign characters I have art of, so there will be some bits of art. But for the first one, there is no art. I played a tiefling called Mint. She was a bard. Bard, not a great choice for a very, very first character, I must say. If you have not played before, I would recommend something a little easier than a bard, because a bard has a lot of things to be juggling at any point. But yeah, she was I can't even at this point remember what subclass she was. I think she was just law. I really don't remember, but I think it was just College of Law. She was a very nature-flavoured bard. Her accent was my accent, because I was too nervous to do an accent, so she didn't have one. She just had my accent. And that was Mint. My next character was Nim. So Nim was supposed to be a full campaign character, but that campaign didn't pan out. I think I do have some art of Nim, in which case I will put her up on screen. Not that I'm glad that the campaign didn't carry on, because it was a really sick premise. But I could tell from the small amount of time that I played Nim that was not the type of character that I would have enjoyed playing long term. And it's one of those things you just don't really know until you start playing. She was a halfling. She was a halfling warlock. A great old one warlock. The warlock, sick. Most of her story's sick, but my problem with the way that I made her was that I kind of wanted her to be like a haunted little girl, like a little weird, creepy girl from a movie. Terrible choice. Hey, terrible choice. She wasn't really a little girl. I had her as 18, but even playing an 18-year-old, hey, not my vibe. I've discovered after that all of my characters 30 plus at the very least. Yeah, I did not like playing a child-coded character, and I can't envision how it would have been playing her for an entire campaign. I have a feeling I would have eventually been like, hey, I've got to change this character. We've got to kill Nim. We've got to get somebody new up in here, because she was called Sweet Nim specifically. She just wasn't. She just was too childish. And not that I don't mind playing like a fun, silly character, which she was supposed to be, because I very much do enjoy playing that. I don't know how to describe it, that it's just not fun playing a childlike character, but it just isn't. Hey, it just isn't. At least not for a full campaign. For a one-shot, that might be fun, but for a full campaign, not fun. Her story was pretty sick, though. She was raised on an incredibly haunted farm. She had a little girl ghost that lived with her, that kind of grew with her, so it was like always the same age as she was. And that was her patron. That was her great old one. However, so there was a very haunted forest that encompassed the town that she lived in, and her ranch was the closest to the edge of the forest, and nobody ever went into the forest. If anybody went into the forest, they did not come out of that alive. And one day she was chasing a little bunny, and she ran into the forest, and then from the second she hit the tree line, she remembers nothing, and then she wakes up somewhere completely different. And the little ghost girl is still kind of following her, but is always at a distance and can no longer communicate with her. So that was Nim's backstory. Like I said, cool backstory. No secret, love a haunted location. So the spooky vibes were sick. It was just the personality that I didn't like. I didn't like playing a very childish character. So that was Sweet Nim. My next character was my beloved TRP. She was mechanically, she was a high elf, blood cleric / long death monk. Non-mechanically, what she actually was a vampire, blood cleric / the long death monk was just vampire. It was just her vampire traits. I would never play a multi-class like that ever again. Again, I had not been playing for very long at the point when I created TRP. A few months at most. There was the one shot, it wasn't a one shot, it was a few weeks long, but it wasn't very long, that Matthew ran, and then a few weeks of Nim, and then TRP. So I'd been playing a few months at most. So the build, ultimately, not great. But TRP, I loved TRP. TRP still to this day is my favourite character of mine. So her story was that she had been raised incredibly rich, but kind of like from a family of crafters, so a family of artisans, might I say. So she herself was, her parents ran a clothing shop, clothing line, basically. High fashion in this world. Her father made shoes, kind of the Louboutins of this world, and her mother was like a clothing designer, a tailor, and TRP was, I took the crafting feat for her. So her main thing was jewel crafting. She was a jewellery maker. But she also had a lot of skills in tailoring. She had skills in shoemaking, and she also had she was a very good painter and a big appreciator of art. So her whole thing in her life had been that she was this very sheltered young girl, very rich young girl. She didn't really have a lot of friends because all she kind of did was spend all of her time helping out her parents, making all these clothes, making these shoes, and then she got into her own hobby of making jewellery, and that became a thing, and she was quite well known as a jewellery maker in this world. And then one day she's at like a ball and she meets a guy, kind of falls for him. He's very charming. His name is Odger, and he woos her, essentially, her first love interest in her life, and he turns her into a vampire. And then she is afflicted with vampirism. Another thing that actually I didn't mention before, she was like a lifelong vegan, and because she was very particular about food her whole life, so she hated the idea of like blood in her food, of meat, of consuming that type of thing. Like, it just knocked her sick. So she'd been a lifelong vegan, and now she was a vampire, and she managed to hold off on drinking blood because she found the concept of drinking blood so disgusting that she just refused to. And she fled her town, her parents. She'd never really been anywhere her whole life. She'd never travelled much, and if she did travel, she travelled in luxury. She travelled in luxury carriages. So she'd never travelled by herself, and she's just in the woods, screaming, crying. Can I say? Oh, I passed the 11-minute mark on my end, so hopefully I can say vomiting. And she's begging to any god for help. She'd never been a religious person before, but she was like, any god, please help me. And the goddess Fafnir, who is the goddess of magic, more kind of witchcraft style magic rather than wizardry, so more folk magic than learned magic. And so Fafnir, his exact words were like, she put a plaster or a band-aid over TRP's vampirism. TRP was called Mirkala Lorathea, and TRP stood for the Red Priestess. I should have said that the whole time, but I didn't. So anyway, then she was so grateful to Fafnir that she became kind of a travelling preacher, but she was so socially inept, and she also had never been a religious person, so this newfound like, hey, do you want to join the church of the goddess Fafnir, she just wasn't very good at it, bless her. And I loved that. I loved playing a preacher who just is rubbish. No social skills, no malice behind them, not like an evil preacher, but just like somebody who just doesn't fucking know what they're doing, has no charisma, negative riz in TRP. And yeah, she was just so fun to play. It was really fun to play, particularly before I revealed that she was a vampire. It was so fun to play somebody who was so obviously knocked sick by the sight of blood. I remember there was a point where we passed like a fishing village and people were like gutting the fish, and she's having to pretty much make constitution saves to not throw up, and then it turns out that she's actually just been a vampire the whole time. So fun, so funny. She was a little bit of a comedy character, in that it was just such a silly concept of a vampire who hated the idea of drinking blood. But as the campaign progressed, she got more used to it. The main kind of catalyst in her story, the main change in her story, was that Ortega, who always considered her his failure, basically worked for her parents, tricking her to come home. And then when she came home, there was a huge combat, and I think, did TRP turn her dad into a vampire? I think TRP might have killed her dad and turned him into a vampire. She got mind controlled by Ortega. Eventually both the parents end up as vampires. Ortega flees, TRP becomes a bit more jaded, less opposed to drinking blood. That's when the monk levels came in, and then ultimately became the queen of the vampires. She managed to free all the vampires. She managed to find a way to pass on her ability to not have to drink blood for sustenance. It was kind of a spell that she learned, and she passed it on to other vampires. And then come the end of the campaign, because she was effectively immortal, her and her vampires became like the watchers of the world. The whole plot of that campaign was that the gods had made huge mistakes, and then it was Angerboda, the god Loki's wife, who was basically starting Ragnarok. Angerboda was a sick villain, by the way. She was my favourite BBG we've ever had. I think it's everybody who I've played with has said that Angerboda was our favourite BBG. Because she was you could understand 100% where she was coming from the whole time. But anyway, TRP's mission became to make sure that stuff like that never happened again. She understood that she and her people were separate from mortals. They went and lived in this land that was called, I think it was called the Ghostlands, and it was where an ancient battle had taken place. Completely grass doesn't grow there, spooky, scary skeletons vibes. So she builds a huge kind of spooky, scary skeletons mansion, spooky Luigi mansion, separate from humans, so that if anything happens with their bloodlust, they're away from humans, they're no risk to anybody, or mortals, should I say. But ultimately, they were the watchers who watched over the mortals to make sure that the gods never tried to intervene and cause another huge rift, another huge war. And that was just such a cool fucking ending. And we've been saying about doing a one shot with those characters again, which I would love to do. I've already okayed it with Jack that that monk shit we're getting rid of, she'd just be a full cleric. I wouldn't mind her being a full monk. That would be pretty fun as well. But she always was a cleric, so I think cleric makes more sense. But just full one of them. Not a multi-class. That wasn't a good multi-class. But again, not the best multi-class. Mechanically, not the best character. But in terms of enjoyment of playing, my favourite by far. I love TRP. I love and miss TRP. What a sweetie. My favourite ever. Next was this next character, I guess, could be kind of considered spoilers for my current character. Not 100%, because I think Margaret and Jack had the podcast at the point that they did. At the point that we played these characters, Margaret and Jack had the podcast. So I think the whole one shot will have been discussed heavily, but this could have spoilers if you've not seen that, if you're not interested in kind of going back watching that, and you don't want to know anything about Lila, who is the grandmother of my current character, Silence. I'll put a timestamp of when you can stop watching about Lila. But Lila she's the grandmother of my current character. So I originally had planned on playing a Gloomstalker Ranger after TRP. So Silence was going to be my next character. And then when Jack kind of gave us the background of what the campaign setting was going to be, he said, the whole thing's going to be based in one city. But he did say at that point that the campaign after that was going to be set in the same world, and it was going to be a bit more expansive than the same city. So Silence's backstory, I felt, didn't work as well in the city. I'm certain if you've been watching the Ascension of Farador, you'll know a bit about Silence's backstory, which I'll get into more deeply later. But basically, Silence's backstory is fairly key for her to have not grown up in the city, not grown up in an urban area, for the character of Silence to make sense as she is. So I decided that she wasn't best for that campaign, that was the Everflame, her sacrifice. She wasn't the right character for that, but I knew that I was going to play her the campaign after. So I decided in the one-shot that was set again in the same world, that I was going to play her grandmother. So Lila was created, Silence was created first, even though Lila was played like 2 years before I started playing Silence. And Lila was a zealot barbarian. She was a celestial. So mechanically she was an ASMR, but within the rules of the game, she was a celestial. Not the rules of the game, sorry. The law of the game. She was a celestial and a zealot barbarian. Because it was just a one-shot and we kind of had one objective of something bad has happened, something has fallen from the sky and hit this town, and I want to prevent this great big creature in the town from getting into the city. That was the whole, it was literally one shot. We played it once, this one day, and spoilers, almost all of the characters that we played in that one shot died at the end. And we always, it wasn't a definite that we were going to die, but it was always going to be tricky for us to survive that. And we all kind of sacrificed ourselves. We sacrificed our characters to prevent this great big thing from getting into the city. So, the city of Isrenda. So, we didn't go into the backstories of these characters at all. I, however, obviously had an entire backstory for Lila because I knew that I was going to play Silence. So Lila was, I don't have like she was born in this is what her parents, blah, blah, blah. I don't have any of that. I didn't do that. But it was basically an idea of who she was as a person. And she was not a good person. We knew that this Ashen Heart was like a religion that was it controlled every aspect of the world. And although at that point we didn't know all the evils that the Ashen Heart had done, we could gather from context clues that they weren't necessarily the best religion, and so Lila was very much a part of that religion, balls deep in that religion, and she was not a good person. Particularly, she was very well respected as a Celestial and as an honor guard, but she was not very well liked as a person because she just wasn't a good person. Or at least, when I say not a good person, I mean not a good person by my standards. Within the Ashen Heart, she was probably considered a very good person. Like, she's just very religious, very out of touch. Yeah, just not a particularly nice or likeable person. And that was kind of Lila's whole thing. She was very, again, zealot barbarian, very zealotous about her religion. And that was Lila. Lila, within our campaign that we're playing now, obviously does not have those vibes at all. She seems very reformed. She seems quite a fairly nice person. She seems to have learned from her mistakes. Which I did say to Jack, like, when I created Silence, I was like, I don't care if the voice who's speaking to Silence actually is Lila. It might be Lila, it might not be Lila. Silence wouldn't know the fucking difference. And I don't mind if this person is good or bad. I just let Jack run with it. So I also wouldn't know 100% who it was who was speaking to Silence and what their intentions were. So Lila within the campaign is obviously a very different person from the one who she was in the one shot. But yeah, that was kind of it. That was my whole thing, was I wanted her to just be a big fucking, she was like a 7 foot tall celestial, ripped to fuck barbarian, and that was the whole thing. And she's the grandma of my current character. So that was Lila. We also played another short campaign in that time that was another campaign of Matthew's. I played a tiefling ranger, a drake. Is it called a drake warden? The dragon ranger, the one that has a pet dragon. I was the twin sister of Margaret's character, whose name I have now forgotten. It was also a food related one. I was Cinnamon. I really can't remember what Margaret's character's name was. But we were twins anyway, and I had a pet dragon called Grape. She was a little green dragon, I think she was. A little grape. It was really fun. I think a Drake Warden is really cool at low levels. I don't necessarily know if it scales that well. So we were at level 7. The dragon was pretty good in battle. I was fucking kicking the shit out of people in battle. I will say, I didn't say about Lila, barbarian, sick, so much fun, so incredibly fun. As was playing this ranger. Yeah, Cinnamon was great. I really don't remember almost anything about her other than tiefling, Drake Warden Ranger, Margaret's character's sister. What was next? Oh, next was Dale. So the next full campaign that we did was Everflame Her Sacrifice. I played Dale Fitzgerald, who was a soul knife rogue. So she's basically a psychic rogue. Dale was a little sweetie. Dale was the sweetest out of all the characters that I've played. I wanted to fight the kind of edgy rogue trope a bit and just play a rogue who is an absolute sweetheart, which Dale was. So her backstory was that she had crawled out of the earth one day. Just one summer's day, she crawls out of the earth, and there are other people who've also crawled out of the earth along with her. And they have like a hive mind, and they all have one purpose and one goal, which is to find the person who they are the doppelganger of, kill them and replace them. So that is Dale's sole purpose at this point, is to go find a woman called Laura Robertson, kill Laura Robertson, replace Laura Robertson. And she did have Laura's memories, a lot of Laura's memories, so that at the point that she kills and replaces Laura, she could do it effectively. She had all of her memories. As such, she was a very charismatic rogue. She was a very high charisma character. I always kind of was umming and ahhing about multiclassing her with a aberrant mind sorcerer, because she had that kind of vibe. But at the end I decided not to, and I'm glad that I didn't. Actually, I don't think that would have been a very great multi-class for her. But anyway, she goes, she finds Laura, she fails to kill Laura, she gets herself injured in the process. And also at this point, another thing is any injury she gets heals like that. Same with all the other doppelgangers. Their purpose drives them, and they could lose an arm and grow it back. But at the point that she fails to kill Laura and Laura gets away from her, she's suddenly disconnected from the hive mind. She has control of her own self. She has no connection with Laura anymore, so she doesn't know where Laura is. She doesn't know what she's up to. She then, from that point on, stops having any of Laura's next memories, if that makes sense. So she still has all of the past memories, but she doesn't have the memories of Laura, what she's done like 5 minutes ago. So she just kind of decides to build her own life. So she starts off just reading a lot to learn about people, because she only really has the memories of Laura, and Laura was not a nice person. Laura was a murderer, she was a thief, just a general scallywag. So Dale starts reading a lot of books. She names herself after one of her favourite authors, Cooper Fitzgerald, so she takes the surname Fitzgerald. And then Dale was a character in a different book, and she basically becomes a librarian. She lives a very nice life, she's very happy, very contented. And her reason, we were all told to give a reason as to why we want to go back into the city. So the city of Isrendith was from the campaign with Lila, the one-shot with Lila. The city has been shrouded in darkness. Pretty much everybody who was trapped in there is now thought to be dead. There's monsters in the city, and we are the first people to go and attempt to reclaim the city. Our small group. So we were all asked a reason as to why we wanted to go into the city. And Dale's only reason is that she worked for a mages guild, and she was a librarian for them. And so she's been sent into the city for the sole purpose of finding rare books and bringing them back and keeping them safe. So that's her sole purpose. Obviously her backstory made her way more entwined. Obviously Laura is in that city, but that's her only reason for wanting to go in. Loads of stuff happens. She eventually kills Laura. She marries. So this is the only time I've ever done character romance, which isn't 100% my thing. But she ends up marrying off camera, out of the campaign, after the campaign, Jace, which is Josh's character, and she lives happily ever after, I guess. She was quite a scallywag in that she liked petty theft. She loved petty theft. She loved going around and just taking things, but never anything important. And she'd always gladly give something back. It was kind of the love of the game that had her stealing. She didn't necessarily always keep what she stole. She just liked the thrill of it. So that was her most edgy quality, was that she liked stealing. But other than that, a little sweetie, little sweet girl. Very fun to play. It was nice to have a high charisma character because she was the first character that I played with high charisma. It turns out, great stuff. Liked that. Just getting good charisma rolls to like persuade people or to deceive people is so fun. So hopefully I'll see that again someday, but not anytime soon because I keep playing low charisma characters. So that was Dale. Cutie pie. Who was next? Matthew did a one-shot. Who did I play in Matthew's one-shot? Oh, I played a paladin. So I played Amber. Mechanically, Amber was a Dragonborn Vengeance paladin, but within the lore of the game, she was a Fire Genasi. I just preferred the stuff that Dragonborns got to the stuff that Fire Genasi got. So we don't play at a strict table. We're very much allowed to pick a race and then not have them actually be that race. I know that some people don't like that. I love it. I love being something else. And we're totally cool with that. So yeah, that's what she was. So the wings, because obviously Dragonborn get wings, I themed that as she had a jetpack. She was very fire themed. The whole paladin, it wasn't within the lore of the character. She wasn't a paladin. She was just kind of a firefighter, and being a paladin worked better than her being a eldritch knight. It just worked better with the smites and stuff. I wasn't that into playing a paladin, if I'm so honest. I do quite like playing a tanky character. As I said, I loved playing a barbarian with Lila. Yeah, I just wasn't that into playing a paladin. I didn't get the glorious nat 20 smite. I don't think I'd rolled a single nat 20 the whole time I played her. So that might be why. Maybe it would have felt much better if I got a nat 20 and got to smite something. But yeah, she was a fun character. She was a silly character. She didn't have a backstory. She was just mean. That was, without a shadow of a doubt, the most morally bankrupt group we've ever played, which is good. And it was also the silliest group we've ever played, I think. Which was fine because it was a very silly premise. The premise of that campaign was that we were kind of trapped in storybooks. So we were trapped in Moby Dick, then we were trapped in Dracula, then it was The Wizard of Oz, then it was Hound of the Baskervilles, and lastly it was Jabberwocky. What's one with the Jabberwocky called? Is it Alice Through the Looking Glass? Regardless, the one with the Jabberwocky. And yeah, she just had a bad attitude. She was just a mean person, which was fun. It was fun to play. I could never play that as a main character. I could never play a long campaign playing it. I couldn't do Evil Aligned. I couldn't do somebody really genuinely mean. But for a silly little one-shot, it was so fun. It was so fun. It was so stupid. And then we're now with Silence. So my current character is called Silence God Be Here. Her real name is Auriel Sarathiel. Mechanically, she's an ASMR Gloomstalker Ranger. Within the lore, she is an ASMR. She's half ASMR, half elf. She was the granddaughter of Lila Sarathiel. She was raised in a cult, so an offshoot of the Ashen Heart that's very, very strict, very overzealous. She was raised within that. Her father is the leader of the cult, Raphael, and he kind of his whole life had been second to Lila because Lila was so important. She was a celestial. She was more powerful than him. So his whole life he'd been second to Lila, and then he formed this cult of basically made up of people that felt that the Ashen Heart weren't doing enough, that they'd gotten too lax in modern days. So they went off to form their own really strict version of the Ashen Heart. And then after Lila died... Oh no, whilst Lila was still alive, Raphael claimed that Lila was the daughter of Kvandir to make him be Kvandir being the god, to make him appear like the grandson of the god. So he claimed that Lila was the daughter of Kvandir. And then when Lila died, it was a huge shock to the cult because they didn't believe that she could die because she was the daughter of Kvandir. So then he claimed that Lila spoke to him, and he kind of ruled through Lila and therefore through Kvandir. And Silence was his daughter. She was born a divine soul sorcerer. She was very powerful. Matthew asked me what level do I think Silence would have been, and I never picked a level, but it would have been a fairly high level sorcerer, I would say, probably 15. I know that, again, sorcerers have high charisma and Silence does not have high charisma, but she's quite subdued in comparison to the person who she was, and B, it was very easy to have charisma when she was constantly around the cult who believed that she was the great granddaughter of the god and who acknowledged that she was more powerful than her father or her grandmother, the daughter and grandson of the god. So I think her charisma was different within the bounds of Bastion. Anyway, her father would execute people for no reason, pretty much. He executed Silence over committing a sin, or what he perceived to be a sin, and burned her in what he claimed was a portion of the Everflame. She completely lost her connection to Kavandir, to the light, her divine soul sorcery, gone. She had been trained in kind of hunting and general ranger skills by her mother, so she was completely blinded by the fire, completely bedbound for a while. Lila started to speak to her and basically gave her a different form of sight, a better form of sight that was better than having eyes, and she eventually left the town with her mum's bow and became a ranger, and ultimately a Gloomstalker ranger. She's a lot of fun. She's very different, I think. So TRP and Dale, I think, were both characters who were quite like me in a way. Personality-wise, not necessarily life-wise. I was not raised an incredibly bougie daughter of fashion designers or anything like that. But TRP just had an element of me in her, as did Dale. Silence, not so much, I think. Maybe there's probably will be something in there, but I think she's the least like me out of any character that I've played. It has been fun. Her complete lack of expression isn't maybe the playstyle that I would play in the future. I like having an expressive character, and I like a character that's funny and got a lot to say, which both TRP and Dale did. Silence doesn't. So I think I like Silence, and I like that I'm playing her, and I think I'll have a great time for the rest of the campaign with her, but I don't think I'll play another character anytime soon that is so reserved and so stoic and so emotionless in a way. I like my characters to be silly. I like them to be silly guys, even if there's very serious elements to them. I think TRP had quite a tragic story, and I think Dale, although Dale's story wasn't tragic necessarily, Dale had a lot of like, who actually am I? Because I'm the doppelganger of this woman who's not good, who's an evil person. So what am I supposed to see? So Dale had a lot of like existential crisis. TRP had quite a tragic backstory. Silence is just grim as a person. And I like that. I love playing a big goth. She's a 6'4" goth. She's great, but I think I'll play another silly guy next time. Speaking of, I can't really say much about what my next character will be, because I don't want to spoil anything, but I will say what class and subclass I'm thinking that she will be. I won't tell a backstory or anything, but I do want to play an undead warlock, and I'm so glad that they released the Unearthed Arcana of Undead Warlock, because I've been banging on ever since 2024 Player's Handbook came out. I've been banging on about the fact that the Undead Warlock wasn't in there, and that I wanted to play it so badly, and then I really hope that they release it, because we do play by the 2024 rules, and we play the 2024 characters, and I've been going on about it constantly that I need them to release the Undead Warlock, and now there's the Unearthed Arcana of it. So it's in the works, and even if it isn't in the works, I will beg and scream and shit and piss and throw up to be allowed to play the Unearthed Arcana version, because that's what I'm planning. So anyway, this has been a really fun video for me, because it's just me ranting about what I love the most, which is my silly, stupid characters. So I really hope that you enjoyed this. Apologies if you don't like somebody just ranting and raving about silly characters. Don't know why you're still here if that's the case, because this has been nothing other than that. But yes, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Fare thee well.